Before servicing this mower, always disengage or remove the batteries. To service the brakes or to access the gearbox or drive motors, lift the back end of the mower and place jack stands under the chassis just in front of the rear cover. With parking chocks on the front wheels, remove the rear wheels, which are secured with 21mm lug nuts. Release the parking brake from the braking position. Then remove the cotter pin that secures the connecting rod and separate this rod and the spring from the mower. Next, remove the two 10mm bolts that secure the brake assembly. Then remove the brake disc and friction block. The brake assembly includes the two brake pins, one scale board, two friction blocks, and the brake disc. Replace the brake disc and the friction block behind it. Then reassemble the brake assembly and secure it to the mower. A feeler gauge can be used to check the clearance between the brake pad and friction block. If needed, use a 13mm socket wrench to adjust the clearance. Follow the recommended torque settings, then back off just enough to release the gauge, about 1/6 of a turn. Complete this repair by reattaching the brake spring and connecting rod. To access the drivetrain, the left and right side covers must be removed, along with the seat assembly and rear guard assembly. The battery box can remain in place. Use a 6mm hex wrench to remove the two screws on the front side of the seat. Then move the seat forward to expose two hex screws that secure the steel rails to the suspension. Remove these screws, then lift the seat assembly and unplug the connector from the seat switch before removing the seat. Using a 13mm socket, remove the 4 hex bolts that secure the seat suspension base to the mower frame. Then remove the 4 T20 torque screws that secure the decorative cover on the front of the seat. Release the seat wire harness from the hook. The seat suspension can now be removed. The decorative cover on the back of the seat is also secured with 4 T20 torque screws. The drive motors can be replaced individually. This repair does not require removal of the entire drivetrain assembly. Release the 5 wire hooks as shown here. Then unplug the 2 power cables that link the motor to the control box. One is a snap-on connection, the other is threaded. Each drive motor is secured with 4 11mm bolts. Once these bolts are removed, slide the motor away from the gear case to remove it. You may need to pry it loose with a screwdriver. When installing the new drive motor, follow the recommended torque as shown here. If you are replacing the drivetrain assembly, continue by removing the left and right steering levers, which are secured with 13mm bolts. Next, remove the cover on the deck height adjustment handle. It is secured with 2 Phillips head screws and a 13mm nut. On the right side of the mower, unplug the Type-C plug and the black plug adjacent to it. These wires link the right side cover to the left side cover. Then lift the wires away from the 4 wire traps on top of the battery management system. On the left side of the mower, unplug the black, yellow, and Type-C plugs. Remove the 4 T30 torque screws on top of the left cover assembly. The one next to the lever is concealed by a label. There are also 2 screws beneath the fender. The rear guard assembly must be removed before the left side cover can be removed. Use a T30 bit to remove the 6 screws, 2 on each side and 2 on the back. To remove the hitch, use a 13mm socket to remove the 2 hex bolts that secure the hitch to the frame. Gradually slide the rear guard away from the battery box and disconnect the left cover cable connector. The rear guard assembly can now be removed, along with the left side cover. With the battery box cover lifted, the left side cover should lift up easily. Removal of the right cover assembly is similar to the left cover assembly, with 4 screws on top and 2 beneath the fender. You are now ready to separate the drivetrain assembly from the mower. This assembly weighs 55 pounds and must be supported from underneath. A pallet jack, as shown here, is recommended. With the drivetrain supported, remove the crossbar to expose the power cables linking the drive motors to the control box. Then release the wire hooks and disconnect the 4 power cables. Now remove the 8 13mm bolts, as shown here. Complete the separation of the drivetrain assembly by removing the 2 15mm bolts on each side. Use a wrench to secure the nut on the underside. Caution: do not remove these bolts unless the drivetrain is supported from below. The drivetrain can now be removed. When installing the new drivetrain, drop the 7-inch bolts in from the top to assist with realignment, as shown here. Once the drivetrain is in position, jack it up until it meets the frame, being careful not to pinch the power cables. Then thread the nuts from below. Follow the recommended torque setting as shown here. Continue by attaching the 8 13mm bolts on top. Again, be sure to follow the recommended torque setting. Reconnect the 4 connectors that link the drivetrain to the control box. Then replace the crossbar. To reassemble the mower, first mount the left and right cover assemblies onto the mower. Each is held in place with 2 T20 Torx screws beneath the cover and 4 on top. Connect the wire harness to the left cover assembly by connecting the yellow and black plugs and the Type C plug, aligning them into the slots as seen here. Be sure to apply dielectric waterproof grease to the Type C plug. The 2 wires that link the left and right cover assemblies should also be aligned in the slots, as seen here. Also, make sure that the charging fuse from the left cover assembly is inserted into the slots beside the yellow plug. Mount the rear decorative cover and tighten the 4 corresponding screws. Use a 10mm socket wrench to mount the left and right steering levers onto the mower, being sure to follow the recommended torque. Use the same wrench to install the nut on the deck height adjustment handle, then install the cover. Mount the seat suspension base and attach the front seat decorative cover onto the mower. Note: the seat wire harness should be routed upwards and around the left side of the seat's suspension rod. This facilitates the plug connection to the sensor switch at the bottom of the seat assembly. To replace the seat, place it against the front of the suspension base and align the holes. Use a 6mm hex wrench to affix the seat rails to the base. Once the seat is secured, move it forward to expose the 2 backside mounting holes in the steel rails of the seat assembly. Secure the rails with the 2 remaining hex screws. Then move the seat all the way back and hook the wire harness onto the seat suspension base. Now install the rear wheels, ensuring that the valve stem faces outside. Follow the recommended torque for the nuts on each wheel, then replace the hubcaps. Complete the reassembly by plugging in the rear guard left cover cable connector. Mount the rear guard assembly onto the mower, and then mount the hitch. Please refer to the EGO service diagram and parts list for specific parts needed for these repairs. Always use genuine EGO parts.